And we're up and running. It's a kind of a mellow morning here in the Midwest. Hot weekend is heading toward us, and we have a new moon, so all sorts of shifts and changes. How are you this morning, Barret?
Well, I feel like I'm enjoying the shifts and changes too. So, as I was saying to someone once, if everything's shifting and changing, well, at least you hope for a holy shift.
Yes, and whatever you wish for, undoubtedly at some point in the space-time continuum, you will experience. You have to be careful about those wishes.
That is true. That is true. But we're all on this path together, and I think sometimes that's really helpful to remember because, yeah, there are times where we kind of are going along the path, and it really feels like we're doing this on our own. And what we can remember is that we're actually all side by side, and we're all moving forward hand in hand. And when we can remember that, it really helps kind of fortify us on our journey. We can realize that the things that felt a little tough, a little heavy, they're not quite as bad as they felt. And yeah, maybe we can just smile that much more and have a little fun with it.
Exactly. And, as we were talking about before we started the video today, the big thing to be very alert to is identity and figuring out who you are and reinforcing the sense of the true self as opposed to the self that we are creating. Says in this section and from the course, self-concept versus self. I find it very interesting because I really have on multiple occasions watched this process evolve with newborns who come into the world and they're a blank slate. They're just pure love and newly arrived from that celestial scene. And then over the next 20, 25, 30 years, they get seriously committed to creating an identity apart from the identity that God had created them for. And it says the building of a concept of the self is what the learning of the world is for. This is its purpose, that you come without a self, which, is very obvious when you first are working with a newborn and changing diapers and making sure they're fed and protecting them and nurturing them. They are incredibly vulnerable by the standards of this world. And it says, and by the time you reach maturity, you have perfected it to meet the world on equal terms, at one with its demands. Boy, that's a scary concept. You've got your club and you're ready to bludgeon anybody that confronts you. And usually by the time you're 12 or 15, you're, pretty much living on the defense and on the run. And it just gets more and more complex from that point on.
It's true. I mean, it's pretty easy to see when we look around the world at what's going on that this is a big part of our world. People with all their different clubs, ready to kind of beat up anyone who doesn't match their idea of what is right or lives on another side of an imaginary line somewhere, and all of a sudden they're the bad guy. Yeah, it's the world that we're living in, a world of separation and cruelty, and if that's what maturity is to the ego, it's actually pretty immature from a perspective of love and kindness. So it's not easy to look at this, right? Because it's so kind of unsettling. But when we really get what's happening here, it helps us to realize what we do want. Going back to what Helen and Bill had as their kind of beginning of the course, where Bill basically was saying how bad all the backbiting and all the pain in their academic environment was, and he said, there's got to be another way, and Helen agreed with him and said, yeah, I'm going to help you find it. I don't know what that is, but we're going to figure it out together. And so it's that letting go of separate interests and coming into some common purpose that really allows people to step out of their old pain. And that's what we're all doing, right? That's what we're doing on this journey. So, yeah, I think just to kind of keep on reading here, he says, a concept of the self is made by you. It bears no likeness to yourself at all. It is an idol made to take the place of your reality as Son of God. So this is really revealing here, right? What is he saying? He's saying what you think you are is not what you are. What you think you are is actually just a concept that isn't true. He says, the concept of the self the world would teach is not the thing that it appears to be. So what's he saying here too? He's saying even how we think of ourselves is not true. He says it is made to serve two purposes, but one of which the mind can recognize. So the first presents the face of innocence, the aspect acted on. It is this face that smiles and charms and even seems to love. It searches for companions, and it looks at times pity on the suffering and sometimes offers solace. It believes that it is good within an evil world. So this is the outer face, right? This is the mask that we all wear in some way in our life. It says, I am hurt, you have done this to me. I am aggrieved because of what you have said or done, or what you haven't said or done. And we all wear this mask in so many ways throughout our life. And coming to recognize this, again, it's not a very fun process to see the ways that we have judged other people in our lives and made them out to be the scapegoats for our problems. But it's really a crucial part of our awakening to what's going on here.
Yeah, that's very true. And within that, we start to recognize the insidious nature of the ego, because it's very easy to imagine our ego identity as being who we actually are. And it becomes very confusing. It's very muddy. I observe people around me talking about my ego and your ego, and I'm taming the ego, and the ego is doing this, and the ego is doing that, and they don't realize that there is only a tiny, tiny sliver of sanity within their experience of this life, because 99.9% of the time we are invested in our ego, either our spiritual ego or our more mundane ego, but it's all the same self. And as we identify with Joe or John or Mary or Bill or whatever, it's very easy to become deluded and imagine that that's the self that God created. But then, when you look at the situation and that same self has a bipolar reaction to being cut off in traffic, the first is rage, and then the second is, oh, I must forgive. It becomes really a source of amusement if you can lighten up and learn how to enjoy the ride and accept the fact that you have created this identity, but that it is not in fact truth. But you are on your way to discover the truth. You're on the way to find the land of Oz.
Yeah. And then catching it over and over again is what our work is. We just keep doing our best to see what's going on, and that kind of moment, like you said, where you notice what you're about to do. You notice you're about to act in rage or respond in anger, and then you sort of stop, right? You say, no, that's not what I want to do. That doesn't make me happy. That doesn't lead to peace. That is our practice, right? Catching ourselves again and again and again and saying, no, this isn't what I want. And so often in the Course, Jesus is really painting us a very clear picture of the ego. This section especially, he really dives into what this self-concept that we have is, and he explains it so well. But again, the reason is because he wants us to see what we're doing, that we're not really fully seeing, so that once we see it, then we can choose something better. As long as we're operating in this sort of zombie, numb to it, I'm not aware of what's happening. What choice do we have, right? And that's how some of our lives feel. So we want to really kind of shake ourselves out of that and say, all right, what I want peace. What I want is joy. And what I want is to let go of this old attachment to pain and fear. And and that's what we're working on.
Exactly. And as part of the text, as we go further forward here, it says, the face of innocence, the concept of the self so profoundly wears, can tolerate attack in self-defense. So that means we're slipping into victim mode. And we are a victim of our surroundings and our friendships and even our body. For is it not a well-known fact, the world deals harshly with defenseless innocence? No one who makes a picture of himself omits this face, for he has need of it. The other side he does not want to see. Yet it is here the learning of the world has set its sights, for it is here the world's reality is set. To see to it the idol lasts. And, when I was studying Mary Baker Eddy's work way back there, she put a lot of emphasis on the fact that this mortal identity that we have is always a victim, over and over and over again. You cannot escape that part of the nature of this realm. So you have to really learn how to recognize when you are being attracted to that nature that is part of your ego, and be able to withdraw from that, pull yourself back from that, and not become entrenched in the belief that you're a martyr for the sake of maintaining your purity and your innocence and your, all of these other things. So it really is a shadow game. And the deeper you go into it, the more complex the journey becomes, because you can isolate incidents and see the truth for what it is. And it gets very much like flypaper. You get stuck in it, and you have to pull yourself free.
Yeah. And it does feel pretty sticky sometimes, but part of our work is ultimately seeing that it's actually feeling sticky because a part of us wants it to be sticky, right? This world doesn't really stick to us, but we stick to the world. And this idea of being a victim is not so much sticking to us either, as we are wanting to be stuck to it. And this is a really challenging part of this, that as we look at this face of innocence, and he goes on a little bit to talk about what's underneath it that we really don't want to see. And what's a little unsettling about it is that there's an attraction to all of this. There's an attraction to this insanity, and there's a part of us that's clinging to it really strongly. And then our work becomes noticing that desire for it, so that we can actually set it down. So just to read a little bit of that next paragraph here, he says, beneath the face of innocence, there is a lesson that the concept of the self was made to teach. It is a lesson in a terrible displacement, and a fear so devastating that the face that smiles above it must forever look away, lest it perceive the treachery it hides. Oh, it's kind of grim stuff here. The lesson teaches this: I am the thing you made of me, and as you look on me, you stand condemned because of what I am. On this conception of the self, the world smiles with approval, for it guarantees the pathways of the world are safely kept, and those who walk on them will not escape. So this is the hopelessness of the ego, right? And the real glue that holds the ego together is this idea of outer blame, right? Because when we really look at the core of all this ego concept, it's actually just incredible that we could believe it at all. It really is incredible in the sense it's unbelievable. But what happens is that we then push that core issue of guilt out of us onto other people, onto other situations, and then all of a sudden it seems to be their fault. It's their problem. I'm suffering because of them, and that's the issue. This is the core dynamic that we really need to look at and undo in our lives, because this is what will lead us to the peace, is letting go of this old pattern that really doesn't give us what we want, right? Because the ego tells us by doing this, we're going to find happiness. Tells us by pushing out our inner guilt, we're going to actually be able to be peaceful. But what does it really give us? Well, it just gives us more of the same thing. It just, the same guilt recycles over and over. And we can't let it go if we're pushing it outside of us to where it's not really based. So this is our practice, and he's pointing us so clearly to help us know what it is we have to do.
Exactly. And, I always, when I'm contemplating the ego, the image that most often comes into my mind's eye is a Cheshire cat from Alice in Wonderland, the self-consuming, mysterious, evasive, and yet it has, that element of cruelty. It likes to bare its fangs. Mm. And in the Course, it says, a concept of the self is meaningless, for no one here can see what it is for, and therefore cannot picture what it is. Yet is all learning that the world directs begun and ended with a single aim of teaching you this concept of yourself, that you will choose to follow this world's laws and never seek to go beyond its roads, nor realize the way you see yourself. So it is like heroin. I mean, it is an addiction, and it is delusional, and like the Cheshire cat, it evaporates, it disappears, because the truth is it was never real. So we have to be alert to when we are indulging that part of our lower nature, and not necessarily panic or get crazy about it, but just to be able to identify it in itself is the beginnings of unraveling it, of disconnecting from it. So it's not like there is a huge sacrifice that you have to make, when ultimately that which is unreal reveals its own non-reality and ultimately just goes away. And that's the journey we're on, not one of strife and struggle. We're not carrying a cross up a hill and getting crucified, unless you're holding on to that identity. And then you are being crucified hour by hour, minute by minute, year by year.
Yeah. So, you could say that all of our work with the Course is basically pulling these nails out, right? We've been nailing ourselves up to the cross. Even if it looks sometimes like we're nailing someone else, well, it's really ourself we're always nailing. And this work then is removing the nails and allowing ourselves to see that there aren't actually any real wounds from them. All the effects of what we think has occurred have not really happened. Why? Because this world is an illusion, and nothing has actually happened here. Now, this is kind of shocking and hard to grasp sometimes, but we're really starting to learn that this world is a hallucination, that it's all happening within the mind, and because of that, it's not really happening at all. Right? This world is a dream world that we're starting to awaken from, and as we do so, we're actually realizing all of the awful things that seem to have occurred have not really happened, and so they've had no effect. Right? What is not real has no effect. So I work with a lot of people on past lives and helping to clear their issues from past lives. And sometimes we come upon some pretty grisly things that happened in another incarnation. But the real healing around it comes when we get to a point of seeing, well, even though I can feel all the feelings in connection with that and allow myself to have them come forward so they can heal, at some point I get to see that didn't really occur, because again, nothing here really occurred. Nothing in the world of time and space actually happened. And the good news of that is it means you're off the hook, right? Whatever bad thing you think you did, whatever guilt you're holding on inside of yourself, if you go deep enough down, you'll see that there is no cause. There is no cause for that guilt, and there is no reason that you need to keep suffering. So ultimately, all of us are going to let go of this internal guilt, and all of us are going to step back into that peace that we've never truly left. So this is just our path, is to continue going down this road and seeing how we get all the way, right? So ultimately, we all want to let go of all of it. And that's what our work is. We just keep chipping away at it bit by bit, and we feel lighter and lighter as we go, until the day comes where we've let go of the last piece, and we really just feel deeply happy and grateful that that nothing really happened, and that we've always been at home in God.
And from my experience, the degrees and the avenues that takes, once again, is a very subtle process. Mm. And frequently, it's a month or even a week or a year later that you suddenly realize, oh, that old identity that I had been holding on to for so long, somehow in the process of the last time slot here, I have lost the attraction for it. I have let it go. So again, we can't put ourselves on a scale of, how much we have accomplished and how much more we have to accomplish. It is a process of forgetting an illusion. And that sounds like, something, once again, out of Alice in Wonderland. It has that nature of realization that that which is unreal has never been real and never can be real. And that gives us a strange footing in this world. But once you start to get comfortable with it, you'll observe the progress, but not in the way that you are pushing for or hoping for or praying for or desiring, because as soon as you add the element of desire, that reinforces the personal self, the ego. So it's just it's kind of like butterfly wings. We're just floating around on these zephyrs that are coming through the trees, these warm summer, spring winds, and there is nothing heavy or burdensome about the journey.
Yeah. And I can't wait for that experience to happen more and more, right? When we really kind of let go of these things. And as I was saying before we got on today, I was feeling kind of called to share one of my poems. So this is from my book, Poems for Jay. It's a collection of poetry I've written, and you can find it on Amazon. This poem just talks a little bit about this process, and it's interesting. You mentioned Zephyr, because there's a little reference to something like that in here. It twists and turns, folds and bends, always starting, then it ends. This world is topsy-turvy quite, since it is made of day and night, of up and down, and hot and cold, of rough and smooth and new and old. But this is not your home, it's true. So you can take a different view. You can see all things as naught, just little toys that you have bought, with coins of envy, coins of greed, guilt and fear their starting seed. But these plants have never grown. You have not their false seeds sown. There is only one true love, and it comes not from above. It shines so bright, both near and far, as an ever-radiant star, scrubbing out the here and there, for there's nothing to compare. Now love sits with gentle ease, blowing like a gentle breeze. The light has found its home within, not to end, or to begin.
That's very cool and very validating and affirming, because really ultimately we're on a journey to discover the meaning of love. We've had all these experiences of what we imagined that love was, but the truth is love is revealing itself in proportion to our letting go of the ego.
Yeah. I like that analogy that the ego is sort of like a brick wall in front of the light. And as we keep pulling the bricks of the ego out one by one by one, the light shines through brighter and brighter and brighter. And eventually the ego wall is completely undone and the light is not blocked at all. So all we need to do is just keep letting Holy Spirit really take that ego wall down for us. Yeah.
And patience is the key to that. Well, this coming weekend, you've got stuff going on. What's happening with Barret's world?
Yeah, Charlie and I are joining for our next Good News on Saturday at Light of Grace Church in West Allis in the Milwaukee area. That's 1 to 3 on Saturday, June 16th. So it'd be cool to see you there. I'm also leading a class on intuition with a friend of mine, Barret, and that's starting on June 23rd at Ahimsa Oak Park. So that's going to be an ongoing class for 6 weeks. So it'd be really cool to have you there too, to explore that part of who we are and open up to that connection to the divine that's there within all of us.
And it's only about a week away, but we have the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. And then we slide into that process of losing a little bit of daylight each day. And on the upside, we'll be gaining more and more light in proportion to how much time we devote to the course, so we can counterbalance that depressing loss of light in the material world by cultivating the inner light.
There we go. I like that. I like that. The light within us never leaves. We always take it with us.
Absolutely. Well, Barret, I will be chatting with you in 1 week. You guys have a great weekend, and I'll be looking forward to hearing a full readout of all of the magical things that are going on as we're progressing here.
All right. Sounds good. This has been really nice, Chris. I always love these talks. And yeah, you have a great weekend too. We'll see you next week.
Sounds wonderful. Bye.
Bye.